this session today, and I will introduce the speakers to you shortly. I don't see the presentation appearing yet. Thank you for this. So welcome again, and let's start with the Standards for Safe Medication Data webinar. Before we really start and go into the content, some rules for you. Please keep yourself on mute. And we have a Q&A facility for you here. Please don't hesitate to put your questions in there. We are happy to answer them and also have the discussion going during this webinar. If you are speaking, please be concise and be clear on what you want to express. And you also may show your approval to questions of your fellow participants. So here's an example of a screen. You can move your mouse around and then the function bar with the Q&A will pop up. And there it's quite easy findable where you can put your question. And one of the panelists or one of the fellow participants will write an answer in the box below. Regarding security, you have received a personal link to this webinar. The session is password protected, and the recording will be available on the YouTube channel of UNICOM, as are the previous webinars that we have been organizing. So you will find all the material, or the webinars at least, that have been given in this YouTube channel. And in the end of the webinar, we will send you a evaluation form, and we would be happy to take your feedback and get that for improvement on future sessions. So the topic for today is standards for safe medication data. We will take you through the results of our work package, which is on the IDMP standards related standards and terminologies. So we will tell a bit about what we have achieved, but we will also look into the future and see what we can do regarding sharing of information and experience, also after the project of UNICOM has ended. And we would really appreciate your feedback there. So we prepared 2 Mentimeters that we will share with you, and please feel free to share your thoughts. So here are the speakers of today. Well, myself, I'm Esther Bielen. I work at NICSTIS, the National Competence Center of Information Management in Healthcare in the Netherlands. Next up is Robert Stackway. And Robert has a really long track record in healthcare information and has played different roles in, as well at the healthcare provider side, as the industry side, and as a consultant. He's currently chairing the CEN 215 Commission on Health Informatics, and also is still a member of the board of HL7 Netherlands. Following Robert, we have Christian Hay, who is involved in the ISO Technical Committee 215 on Health Informatics and is chairing the Working Group 6 on Pharmacy and Medicines Business. And he has a long track record with GS1 and has been a driving force implementing GS1 standards in the Swiss healthcare sector. Lastly, we have our colleague Zen Ishwek, who is my colleague at NICTIS, and he joined the project a little bit later, but has been substantial in yeah, delivering our deliverables. And for the panelists, yeah, you are all invited to share your opinion and your questions. So please feel free to use the Q&A for that, and later on the Menti as well. So in work package 1 of UNICOM, we are together with many of the standards development organizations. You can see them here on the screen. It's from various nature, like HL7, IHE, but also some organizations which joined a little bit later. For example, the Uppsala Monitoring Center, IDUQM, MEDRA. And altogether, yeah, there are about 100 different standards that are somehow related or impacted by IDMP data exchange. Next slide, please. And what we have been doing, and was the task also from the grant agreement of UNICOM for our work package, is to have a look at the different standards that are affected by IDMP and identified the gaps within those standards in order to embed the IDMP standards in their own standardization organization standards. There was a task also directed by SNOMED to see all the activities related to adverse events. There has been a model, information model developed that's available. And there has been set up also an educational program. And lately, last year, well, from mid last year, I think, we started together with a couple of standardization organizations to really have test activities. So with some industry partners together, we were working on having IDMP implementation in real case scenarios, and that we have been developing within the fire connectatons and also IHE connectatons with a lot of parties together. On the right side, you can see the links to the blue lines, underlined words. These are the deliverables that are available for yeah, your review and to have a look at them. Slide, please. So one of our deliverables is also IDMP in a capsule. And here we try to, or we aim to describe what IDMP standards can contribute in a real patient journey. And we have been describing the different organizations from the regulatory side up and until the clinical, so the healthcare provider and the patient side, in a more understandable and easy readable way. And these yeah, IDMP in the capsules, as we call them, have been published in 5 different languages, and they are all available on the website of UNICOM as well. And lastly, I would like to share with you that we created a video, a demonstrative video. And here you also see a patient journey from a lady called Helen who travels from the UK to the Netherlands and is in need of a medicine. And the clinician, by means of IDMP standards, can then find the right equivalent that Helen would have taken in the UK and find the right one and equivalent with the same substance, the same strength, etc. in the Netherlands, and can dispense it safely to Helen. The nature of how we have been working the last 4 years is that, like the standardization organizations that you saw on the previous slides, we're all at the same table, and we provided a platform for discussion by having bi-weekly meetings. Every representative of those organizations could bring their questions to the table, and we would discuss them and see if we could overcome and answer those questions. It was also a means of sharing knowledge and experience, and that's what also the aim was of the community of expertise webinars like this one of today. As I already mentioned, we have been trying to identify the gaps and work towards two solutions with the relevant SDOs. And of course, we reached out to other work packages within UNICOM to align with them and liaise with them as well. So in the end, we believe that the deliverables that were produced will benefit the implementation of IDMP standards at this moment, but also in the future, of course. And today we will look at more the future side of things to see what we can do to sustain the IDMP standards for all the stakeholders the next years. And with this, I would like to hand over to my colleague Christian.
Thank you, Esther. Yes, the work started actually by kind of searching what is on the market, what is available, and where the problems are. And we were tasked to deliver a so-called gap analysis. I'm going to tell you a couple of things about this gap analysis. It is a very important milestone for the UNICOM work. If my computer accepts to turn the slide, it's nice. Voilà. So we recognized before starting UNICOM, that was late 2019, that there were some uncertainties around the way the various standards and terminologies articulate. Sometimes we are not using the same terms for the same concept. That's difficult for the implementer and those who want to understand all these things, and so forth. So we decided, and we were tasked to write this gap analysis. The objective was to provide a documentation of the gaps we have found or which have been raised by a stakeholder. So when we found the gaps by ourselves, it was within Work Package 1, so the standard development organizations you saw on Esther's slide before. And when it is about raised by the stakeholder, that comes mostly from the other work packages where you find either the national competent authorities or the e-health authorities or people from other spaces around the use of medicinal products. The gap analysis was not only, a nice radiography of what exists, but it was also a mean to trigger actions from the other standard development organizations. Is it by clarifying what was not clear? Is it by working for better adjustments between their standard and the other ones, and so forth? And nowadays, because we are at the end of the project, the purpose is to document what the standard development organizations have done during the course of UNICOM and what remains to be done, because not everything is finished yet. The first thing we addressed was to understand the landscape. It seems so simple when you think, oh, a medicinal product. Well, I take my box and I have it. But if you look a bit more in detail, we have identified these 5 domains to implement IDMP. So from On the left, development and production. To the right, utilization and outcome assessment. And we use that, and you will see this slide or this graphic again later in today's presentations. We have identified these to structure our thoughts and to be sure that we understand the same concept across these 5 domains. That actually, this is, I mean, for interoperability. Interoperability requires differently that we use the same concept as far as it is possible. So we worked a lot around these 5 domains. As I said, Robert Stegway will speak about that in a moment, but that structured our thoughts. And because UNICOM would not be UNICOM without the COVID pandemic, we had planned in March 2020 a 3-day workshop for all the UNICOM member associated participants, a workshop of 3 days where we had prepared a series of workshops, so simply workshops, which you'll find here. So for dose form, what is a dose form? And they are full of mysteries around dose forms, e-prescription, e-dispense, and so forth. Sometimes the acronym might be a bit obscure for you, so IDMP, I suppose you know, but ICSR, individual case safety reports, so adverse event. We will speak about that later. PHPID, what is this? The pharmaceutical product identifier. IDMP and HL7 fire. Well, this is possibly also to explain that IDMP is an ISO standard per se, to start with, where we speak about the concepts. And when it is closer to the implementation, HL7 fire comes to play. And we had a webinar workshop and a webinar later on that. IDMP and FMD. FMD stands for Falsified Medicine Directive. UNICOM is a European project, and we have a regulation, a directive about the fight against medicinal product falsification, and how these 2 things fit together seem to be important to us. And last, we spoke about IDMP and the relationship between SNOMED clinical terminology and MEDRA, which is terminology, but more in the regulatory side to support adverse events. How does these things articulate? So the purpose was, the idea was to have this 3 days workshop to collect, information to feed the gap analysis, but the circumstances were not easy to implement this. So instead of a face-to-face workshop, we had a series of 7 virtual workshops, which took place as soon as UNICOM and we at Work Package 1 were reorganized. And that was, in a way, the start of the Committee of Expertise. And with that also the possibility to collect information for the gap analysis. So that's the very important milestone we did to start with. And now I'm going to pass the floor to Robert Stegway, who will address what we achieved during the UNICOM journey.
Yes, thank you, Christian. And I'll come back to the gap analysis later on in my presentation. Let's first focus on what we've achieved across the landscape. And if we go to the next slide, you see that we've extended the landscape with 3 of kind of the high-level processes that we're addressing. It's not just the clinical use of medicinal products, it's specifically, and that's where IDMP started, the authorization part, so the regulatory process. And we also have identified a 3rd major process that's really about the boxes and how the boxes move. So the whole supply chain part. And I'll plot some of them, our achievements here. First, in the next slide, we see that we did things at the overarching level. So we really looked at substance, dose, form, and strength, and really had some intense discussions on what needed to be done there. How do you calculate strength? What dose forms are distinguished? How do we talk about substances? So those three things are the key ingredients of the IDMP standard. So they really needed to be fleshed out. The other thing that Esther already mentioned is the logical model that we produced, and that's shown here. Actually, what we've done is requirements for an IDMP logical model that we are handed to ISO for further elaboration. And it really looks at, we need one logical model to tie into the detailed models of every step across the landscape. So we have the summary of product characteristics, say the leaflet around the medicinal product on the left-hand side. And if you go all the way to the right-hand side, you see the individual case safety report and the supply chain logical models. So, and some items need to be in common because otherwise you don't get interoperability across the value chain or across those major processes that we identified. So that's what we handed over to ISO, and ISO is working on that model and also within detailed standards on the more detailed models as well. So if we go to the next one, we can first look at the industry and regulatory side. What we've done there is really look at FHIR, FHIR for submissions. That's mostly been done within Work Package 3 and with the European Medicines Agency for their electronic application forms, which actually turn submissions into FHIR. And the idea is, of course, that those same FHIR specs can be used for the submissions themselves. And that's something that's being worked on. The next step in that area was we also clarified the notion of a manufactured product, because that had been kind of missing from the specifications. So we provided clarification on that. The next step is, of course, if we go from the regulatory part into the dissemination and information, we've looked at the setup for information exchange between the national competent authorities and the medicinal product dictionary providers, and also to the national contact points for e-health, which support the cross-border prescribing and dispensing. And that's where I want to give you a little bit of an example of what needs to be done there. Especially in FHIR, you see that the regulatory world on the bottom side has a very detailed definition of what a medicinal product is, how it is being used, how it's being manufactured, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas on the upper side, that's the model for prescribing and dispensing, and that's a bit easier model. So what we need to do in that change over from the regulatory part to the information and dissemination part is actually make this move into the different model. And there's one shared resource on the upper left-hand side of the lower box, and that says medication knowledge. That's the medication knowledge that goes into clinical decision support systems. That's partly in the regulatory world, but is used in the clinical world as well, especially for decision support and providing safe medication safety. So that's the link there. If we go on, then the information dissemination is also looked in, as I said, for the cross-border part. So if we go there, then we see that we already have made change requests to the MyHealth@EU infrastructure for cross-border e-prescribing and e-dispensing, but also for the patient summary to include those substance, dose form, and strength elements in those specifications, so that it's clear that it's not just a local product, but you can also identify what that product would be in another country based on those three characteristics. And that has to do with substitution. So if we go to the next, we also provided a substitution demo to actually make that visible in real life. And we did that during the IHE Connectathon in Rennes. And you see here that if a patient provides through an app with a QR code to a pharmacist, then the pharmacist can scan that. We'll get the actual identification and the details of the drug that was prescribed, and then can look up and generate a list of similar drugs with the button in the middle, and get the list of what are the comparable products in my country. And Nicole and Agiris, our colleagues in the UNICOM test lab, actually presented that demo in Rennes. So this shows you that it works. And how does it work? It works through what we call the data pipeline. So how do we get that substitution list? There is an engine somewhere in the pipeline that takes those definitions from the national competent authorities and looks up what are the comparable products in my country, and then provide that to the pharmacist to actually dispense the correct medication. And of course, the yellow block, the patient plays a role in this scenario because the patient holds that QR code for the medication that was prescribed to him or her. And this links into the overall view on the next slide of the UNICOM test lab, where we really have looked at the whole part as a data pipeline from industry all the way down to the actual use by the patient, and even the reporting of adverse drug events that I'll come back to later. So you see that there's not only systems, but there's also people in that data pipeline that need to do things and need to add things and need to play their role in order for all this to work. Next slide, please. So if we go to the next achievement, that's really the lookup function. We talked about substitution. You can do a substitution based on substance, dose, form, and strength. But the whole idea around the pharmaceutical product identifier that is part of the ISO IDMP set of standards is really to provide that lookup based on the medicinal product identifier in a country with the global PHP ID. And I'll give you an overview of how that works. We've tested this in the next slide during the Fire Connectathon. Actually took several Fire Connectathons, but in Athens we actually demoed it live to people using the UMC Fire demo. I'll have to go back a little bit on the top left-hand side. No, just on this slide. You see the Global IDMP Working Group. That's a collaboration between the European Medicines Agency, the American FDA, and the UMC, the Uppsala Monitoring Center, that's doing pharmacovigilance. And they identified in that Global IDMP Working Group 3 use cases: pharmacovigilance, drug shortages, and cross-border healthcare. And all those 3 use cases need the same scenario. If I find an adverse drug event with a particular product, I need to be able to look up the global product through the PHP ID and see if there's other people that have experienced the same type of adverse drug events. Cross-border healthcare, that was a substitution demo, uses the same thing. If this is the MPID locally that was prescribed, we look up at the PHP ID, and then using that PHP ID, we can then get a list of matching MPIDs in that country. And we've shown through a Fire demo provided by the Uppsala Monitoring Center that it actually works. And we did that as part of the Vulcan HL7 Fire Accelerator. And we also joined forces with the Gravitate Health Project. And I think I spent a few more words on the Gravitate Health Project because they are really about making the information on medication available to patients in their local language. And for that, they've actually used also the PHP ID and the MPIDs to actually make sure that you can navigate from a foreign country description of a product to your local language description of a product. Next slide, please. So if we look at what we're doing, Gravitate Health is really at the utilization and outcome side. So we are looking at better information for patients. And if we click, it should show up. That's what the Gravitate Health Project is working on, the EPI, the electronic product information in local language through what they call the Gravitate lens, that also uses patient characteristics to filter out the relevant information and the irrelevant information, of course, so that you just get to see those things that are key for your health and care. The API is now in the process of becoming an ISO standard as well. So that's a very good thing. But we also want to make sure that we can get the information from the patients, and that's indeed on the next block that you saw. Improved adverse drug event reporting. And I've prepared a slide on that topic as well. So that's on the next slide. We had a report from the MHRA as part of one of our communities of expertise. They are looking at what they call yellow card reports. Yellow card reports are reports of adverse drug events, including medical history, including some lab tests. And you see here in the overview that more and more people are doing that electronically, either through the yellow box, their clinical systems, or through a website. And you see a rise in both, which is good news because it means that more adverse drug events get reported electronically to the MHRA in the UK. And this is where the mapping comes in, because clinical systems, especially in the UK, are using SNOMED as their codes for things like what's the problem, what's the medical history, what are the lab tests. But the reporting of adverse drug events across the pharmacovigilance agencies needs to be done in MEDRA. So as part of the Web Radar project, SNOMED and MEDRA had already been working on, with the help of the MHRA, on that mapping from SNOMED to MEDRA and the other way around. And they reported great benefits of using that mapping in terms of less inconsistencies, better quality of data, and a much more streamlined process because you didn't have individuals trying to do the interpretation from one code system to the other. And the first release of this map was done in April 21, and there have been continual updates, I think, on a yearly schedule of this mapping. So it's being kept up to date. It's managed mapping. It's not a one-off from a project, but it's now managed by SNOMED International and MEDRA together, or the MSSO, I should say, which is the MEDRA support organization. So those are the highlights that I wanted to present to you across the whole landscape. And you can already hear that some of these were really informed about from the gap analysis. So if we go to the next slide, please. We want to take this forward. I mean, this is not done. And as Christian already mentioned as part of his talk on the gap analysis, we're not there, and we will probably never be done. So if we go to the next slide, what we've done is really, with the gap analysis, we identified problems based on the user experience and expert input. We then worked on resolutions across and within the standards organizations. Then brought it back to implementation. So some of the things that we've developed have been demonstrated. Some are even implemented in systems like the electronic application forms that will go live somewhere later this year with the European Medicines Agency. But there are some sort of resolutions that are still in the process of standards revision. And of course, new issues will come up. So this whole thing is about how do we get this work that we've done as work package 1, how do we keep it moving in the future? So that's the next slide. Who's going to do this? And we've been thinking about this in terms of, well, it's a work in progress, of course. We use the working title as the Institute for Safe Medication Data, because we feel that this way of working of work package 1 needs to be continued in the future. And that's also the feedback that we have been getting, but we're hoping to get your feedback in the next section with the Mentimeters. And just as a way to continue the work, with the user community and providing the coordination also across the standards communities and the global communities like UMC and MEDRA and EDQM, which are not officially standards developing organizations, but they're part of our landscape, if you will, or our community to make standards work for safe medication data. We've already included some of the suggested tasks of such an institute based on what we've been doing. So support this community of expertise that we've created over the last 4 years of the UNICOM project, coordinate the ongoing development of the standards, of course, and those tasks are really related to the picture on the lower right-hand side, and that's the health informatics standards lifecycle, where we have the standards, we have the use case-based specifications of a standard set. We do provide tooling and education, and we do provide testing, but we also need to make sure that we get feedback from live deployment, and we need to have those forums and monitoring out there to actually make sure that we're still doing the right things. And that's where we get our input for the next iteration of the gap analysis. And using that feedback, we can then say, well, this needs to be changed either in the base standards or in the use case-based standard sets that are specific to, for instance, electronic prescribing, cross-border, or other things. And again, I cannot stress enough the value of tooling and education in this, and that's that you see also on the suggested tasks, to have that education there, because very few people know about IDMP. It's not easy to get access to the information. I mean, you can buy the standard, but how do you read a standard? And that's really expert work. And we do need to have certification and testing of products and services, but also certification of people and organizations. How do you know that someone is capable and qualified to actually implement IDMP? How do you know that? So we will work together on that in the future as well. The first foundation was laid in our education deliverable that Esther described earlier. So that's what we're thinking of, but we don't want to think this by ourselves. We really want to engage with you to make this happen. So that should be on the next slide. And I hand over to Esther.
Thank you, Robert. Yeah, so I would like to invite you to take your phone and either scan the barcode that you see on the right side, or go to menti.com and type in the number 23633097. We will give you a couple of minutes to get there. See, people are responding already. Thanks so much for the thumbs ups. It's always good to see. Would you like to comment on this, Robert or Christian?
Glad to have these high marks. So I'm very happy with these responses. And we also have to thank, of course, all the presenters and panelists that we had over the 25 communities of expertise that we've had so far, because only this one has been done by the leadership of Work Package 1, and the rest was mostly done by the experts from our partners in Work Package 1, and sometimes even outside Work Package 1. So I'm very glad to see these numbers.
Yeah, on my end, I would say if we cumulate the number of people having attended a community of expertise live, we have an impressive number. And that shows also that the interest is high to understand what UNICOM is delivering on the European scale, but also for stakeholder and observer from outside Europe. It is important to understand, is it from the Americas? We had attendees from the north and the south of the Americas. We have had also attendees from Asia Pacific regions. So it's interesting. Of course, they are not the main participants. Like today, we have probably 95, 96% of, I would say, European in terms of continent attendees. But from the questions we received, I noticed that we have at least one American colleague asking a good question, actually, in the Q&A. And if you allow me, I will just read the question. I think it is interesting. He's asking, is further harmonization of the medicinal product model at the level of H7, where two working groups are dealing with medicinal products. He's asking if more harmonization in the future is needed. And I would say yes. So they have at H7 International, they have one group where they address more the medicinal product on the regulatory side, and one group where they address the medicinal product more on the clinical side. I mean, that's so it has been set up probably long ago. And of course, these two groups need to have an intense dialogue because at the end of the day, they speak about the same product. So yes, we could only encourage that. And actually, that was also part of what we discovered in the gap analysis. And I think progresses have been made, and certainly they will continue to be made if the experts in these groups are aware of the need to have a closer conversation between the two groups. Regarding the community of expertise, I said the big number of attendees, I don't know the accumulation, but it's far more than 1,000 attendees, different attendees, I mean. So it is a really impressive audience we have reached over the time. And we are grateful also for this attention. Robert?
Yes. It's good to maybe mention again that all the webinars, all the recordings are available on the UNICOM YouTube channel.
Go to the next slide. We have
Yes.
30 responses out of 70 participants. I would call on everyone to really pick up their phones for the next one, because that's where we really want your input in terms of do you have gaps? Do you see gaps that should be addressed urgently in our standards landscape in your particular world, part of the world, part of the landscape that you're working on?
So here we are asking for keywords. You cannot enter a paragraph on your cell phone, but keywords, that helps us also to document where we should have been better, possibly. And perhaps it's also the right time to say that from the Mentimeter, we are going to extract information to develop the business plan, which is our last deliverable. So, two interesting points. VMP is obviously not an IDMP word concept, but it's very important in the landscape. I mean, it's the link between the clinic and regulatory in a way. The PHP ID generation logic. So PHP ID, I repeat for those who are less familiar, but PHP ID stands for Pharmaceutical Product Identifier. How does one generate this? Yes, it's a fair question. Actually, I think we recommend to have a read on the IDMP in a capsule, because that's explained in it in a rather simple way. So it's certainly a way to find information about this generation logic.
And there is work being done at UMC as part of the GIDIWIG project, or part of the GIDIWIG, where they are testing the logic, and they will provide their documentation for public comment later on. Of course, they need to be sure that the logic works. Tested on a number of databases and cases, but they are working on it. An interesting thing to talk about also in terms of the FHIR Connectathon that we had is that we actually also tested the FHIR interface to actually get a PHP ID generated based on substance, dose, form, and strength parameters. And that production logic, the generation logic, and the interaction with the user that wants to get a PHP ID has been tested also for the first time during the Athens and virtual Connectathon last January.
Yeah, I see somewhere the batch ID and serialization. This is a gap point which has been identified in the gap analysis. The gap analysis is publicly available, and in the version you have currently online, you have also rather extensive answers on some of the gaps, especially this one is documented, and there is a reference to an ISO specification explaining the link between IDMP, batch ID, serialization, all these things that cannot be done so quickly. Nevertheless, I want also to say that there is a community of expertise where this is addressed. It was one of the first community of expertise. SNOMED WHO drug mapping, that's an open question, honestly. If I just pick that out, it's an interesting point. We have established, I think this is certainly a benefit of UNICOM. We have established a working method between the standards organizations and the UMC, so Uppsala Monitoring Center, has become relatively early a member of Work Package 1. And WHO drug is the medicinal product dictionary maintained by UMC. So I don't think there is a mapping between SNOMED and WHO drug, and I don't know if that would be beneficial. I don't know, but there is a connection between this organization, SNOMED International, and that organization, UMC, and I would say the collaboration between these organizations, these two, but the others as well, have increased doubtless during UNICOM. And that's the reason also why Robert explained before that what we have done in Work Package 1, which is actually this collaboration and more, but what we have done should continue after that. So we defined the working title, Institute for Safe Medication Data and not Practice, because that was another, to continue that work. We don't know exactly how it will be existing and how. Yeah. Well, there are many other points. alliance pack size, that's also a topic. Prescribe and dispense. This is a topic where the European Union is also releasing guidance, and ISO is in the process to finalize the revision of the e-prescription, and we will restart a job with e-dispense. Our current specification on e-dispense is not fully appropriate, I mean, subject of critics. So we will work again on it. So you see that e-dispensation later as well. Regarding the clinical use cases, I want to mention that UNICOM has prepared a workshop, which is very small. We have invited a very small number of experts to join to discuss a certain number of use cases, and that's called in by UNICOM, but inviting people outside UNICOM as well, especially from the clinical use case or the pharma industry, and also EHR vendors, etc. So we are going to, and that's my hope, of course, deliver a report on what are the findings about these conversations, which will take place later this month. Obviously, one of our participants today is likes mapping exercises. We have at least 2 mappings here. Our experience is not necessarily that mapping is an optimal thing, because that requires heavy maintenance.
Yeah, and the don't know in the middle stays there quite substantially. So I'm just wondering what that means. Either people will think there are no gaps, maybe, could be an explanation, or people have no real clear view, maybe, on what could be the potential gaps. And also for that, having a look at the available gap analysis could help maybe to get a more clearer view on that. At least the gaps that we have identified so far, of course.
So there is a very specific question from Ursula. It is about the EPI program at EMA, and we are, I mean, UNICOM and our community of standard development organizations, we are in a close relationship with EMA regarding the EPI. And at the moment, we have to recognize that many aspects of IDMP are still, I would say, in the course of implementation. I wouldn't say it is a plug and play at the moment. So those working on the EPI pilot, they work with what they have. And from the conversation I had with these people at EMA, as soon as we are, I would say, in a good shape regarding the term was SPOR, but regarding IDMP implementation at EMA, then there will be a switch on the IDMP identifiers. But it's a little bit like chicken and egg. If you wait until IDMP is fully implemented, you may wait long to have an API pilot. So the decision has been made to work the 2 things in parallel. And I think I know Ursula, and I wonder just if she's agreeing with me. Who would have thought that IDMP would be so long to implement?
There are some comments in the Q&A as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. Pardon me, it's interesting. Oh, everything is interesting, but the use case would be the one regarding SNOMED WHO drug mapping. And the use case would be similar to the SNOMED MEDRA mapping, getting the medication data from EHR in SNOMED and take it to the pharmacovigilance system to report a case using WHO drug. Actually, it's using MEDRA, where we find the equivalence between in terms of terminology, and then process that in the other standard. So this question is an interesting one, and I take it especially because in the workshop I mentioned before, we will speak about exactly this situation, clinic to regulatory regarding adverse event reporting and ICSR. So perhaps Daniel will keep an eye on the UNICOM website until we deliver this report. And the good news is since UNICOM is terminating in May, you don't need to wait 1 year to see the report. That should be done before end of May.
There's another question or some comments from Catherine about the knowledge gaps and providing guidance, and that's indeed one of the things that we focus on from an SDO perspective as well. That one of the things that you need to make sure is that people actually have the ability to learn about the standards and not just wait for them to come to you, but also actively reach out through community of expertise webinars like these to actually make that happen. And a lot of other projects are doing that also, and we're also working together with some projects to actually do those things together, like the Gravitate Health project that Catherine has been talking about.
There is a specific question from Eric. Where can we find the information used for the proof of concept of the list of similar drugs? I would like to respond to this offline because it's probably not so simple to explain that so on the spot. Robert, do you agree?
Yeah, I provided an answer in the Q&A a little bit that this will be part of the deliverables, upcoming deliverables on both the test lab and on the substitution component and the IDMP database from Work Package 6. There's some information on the website, but please do reach out with specific questions. Because there's quite some work behind it in terms of comparing and gathering the actual medicinal product data that's been used as part of those pilots.
Okay. Can we go to the next?
That's just to give us an idea of how much work it is to keep up to date with IDMP and the related standards and terminologies. We'd like to ask you to answer this question so that we get a feel of how many communities are you currently part of, and does this collaboration of SDOs actually provide direct benefit to you, because we're no longer in you don't need to be in 5 places at the same time, but can be one place to have a kind of a one-stop shop discussion on IDMP related standards and terminologies.
Yeah, when we prepared this question, Robert and myself, we were thinking that we work in a kind of an ecosystem, and many of us in Work Package 1 at least we are engaged in more than one SDO and sometimes a lot. But we are certainly exceptions. And I think the blue bar is more realistic. Not everybody is engaged in standard development activities. But those who are, we were thinking sometimes they are engaged in many organizations. And apparently that's not right. I see 2 is well ranking, but you know, the spectrum of the standard development organization is large, but it's a small ecosystem at the end. And the way we will communicate in our business plan also is impacted by this series of answers. If we learn here that I would say there is a large majority of people not engaging directly with standard development organization because they don't have time, because whatever the reason is, then we should also consider some aspects such as what Robert was saying about education and certification. If somebody is not engaged in a standard development organization, might be interesting for this person to get, I would say, an education offer to get, close to IDMP without spending hours in discussing the gender of the engine before. So don't be shy, please. Give us the feeling, and I really appreciate it if you say no. We are as happy as if you say 5. We don't have an opinion really on that, but it's necessary for us to understand a little bit better who is engaging with us and what they are doing regarding standards.
I think there's a question in the Q&A from Elin. We have identified that PHP-ID do not group the administrable products according to clinical needs. Where is the expertise organizations where cases can be reported and addressed? And that kind of links into this Mentimeter, because it is about the one-stop shop. So hopefully there would be at some point a clear address to send your question and report to. Currently, I'm a bit baffled by the question, because as far as I know, PHP IDs are, at least not global PHP IDs, are not being used in clinical practice. And they're, as far as I know, not even being distributed yet at least not by UMC, as far as I know. There should be, and there will be, and I think that's part of the operating model that's being developed on the PHP ID generation. There should be kind of a help desk where these cases should be reported if indeed something goes wrong with the PHP ID. But of course, there's this links also to the discussion that Christian mentioned a little bit about the virtual medicinal product. That's also another way of grouping administrable products according to clinical needs. So that's exactly the kind of places where we would like to have those discussions. So, but and maybe there needs to be a further discussion on which current PHP ID you're referring to.
The PHP ID nowadays is not available per se. We have testing environments at UMC where global PHPID is calculated and prepared, but it's not meant to be used widely because it's for testing purpose these days. EMA doesn't have a PHPID yet. They have another concept, which in due time I will hope they will replace with the global PHPID, because we have to understand that one of the main role of the PHPID is to support pharmacovigilance, not clinical practice. Using PHPID in clinical practice will be very interesting and very important, I think, without replacing existing processes, but completing them. But that will not happen before my retirement.
In the interest of time, I suggest that we move to the next part. So we will have enough time for the other Mentimeter as well. Unless there's any urgent comment from one of the participants, maybe. And if not, thank you very much, everyone, for providing your input. This is really valuable. We go back to Robert, I think.
Yep.
It was very quick. See if I can get the screen back. We did have a discussion slide somewhere there, but we did most of the discussion already. So again, in the Mentimeter, next question would be for the objectives of an institute for safe medication data. Again, it's a short, just keywords to get the discussion going. And of course, please keep in mind what we have been doing, but there might be other objectives to look at.
Wow.
In the meantime, there's some answers by Ellen and Christina and Norman on the PHPID and for clinical needs. It's about the design of the PHPID, and yes, the PHPID as designed is not cannot claim clinical appropriateness because that's not part of the PHPID design. One of the things that we've been discussing, and there was also a very nice workshop in Athens from the UNICOM test lab on this substitution part, and there will be an interplay between the actual products that you get through the PHPID and your MPID list with the clinical decision support system that should include also substitution logic. And some of that substitution logic is very much linked also to local practice and local regulation. So that has been identified. One of the things we also did to address this issue is both at the Ghent meeting that we had and also in Athens, we kind of had a substitution game to see what are the ways in which you look at actual substitution in a clinical perspective to learn from what does this mean, how does it work, and if I'm not mistaken, we're working on an online version of that game as well to capture more of the understanding of what does it mean to do clinical substitution based on substance, dose, form, strength, and hence the PHPID calculation. And how can a clinical decision support system that's one of the key things of a medicinal product dictionary and a clinical decision support system to actually add knowledge that's not part of the regulatory process, but is very relevant for the clinical context. So those are definitely topics that are definitely.
I would just ask that person who wrote Another Institute's Doubts. We are not, keen to have another institute. I must say, we just gave a name to that because it's easier to speak about something which has a name. But if that person could not be shy and in the Q&R write the name of an existing institute which could do that job. I'm absolutely with that person. Another institute, another slice of complexity. That's certainly not good. We think that we need a place to work with this, to work with global governance. My God, that's a challenge. Unification, another challenge. Implementation, another challenge. That these are really high expectations. But if we look at support transparency or promotion, training skills tooling, that would be interesting. I appreciate also hello. That's certainly not helpful, but it's nice. We appreciate. And inform. Yeah. So please, really, if that person could give us, even if the idea is crazy, it doesn't really matter, because it's easier to be crazy when we are free than when we are alone. So just write what you think at. We will certainly consider that and have thoughts about it. Here we have really keywords which are all different. That's interesting. Okay.
This is helpful because this does kind of gives background to well, it should be many different things to different people, and we need to be aware of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's just kind of more a platform or an alliance of organizations that each could focus on different roles to actually make this happen. And that's of course what we've been working on as Work Package 1. We were just a platform for collaboration, as Esther explained in her opening remarks. Mm-hmm. Between people that are trying to make things help work in real life based on the knowledge that's out there. Very good. Do we want to go to?
Yeah.
Was there a next one? I think there was. Yeah. We look at stakeholders. These are the 7 groups of stakeholders that we've identified across the landscape again, and we'd like to see who you feel should be the priority stakeholders that need to be addressed in terms of the Institute for Safe Medication Data and our continuing work on standards and resolving gaps or identifying gaps in the standards from that stakeholder perspective. And if we're missing ones, then please add them in the Q&A, because as far as I know, Mentimeter doesn't allow us to add other and keywords there. This is just based on 2 responses, so don't take this ranking as the final ranking from this audience.
Not really.
It's moving.
Well, the interesting thing is now the patients which were at the very bottom have ranked second.
Yeah, that's what you get with small numbers. It can change quickly.
But it's also because in the same line we have patient, public health, and pharmacovigilance. So maybe it's not the patient as a consumer, but the patient as an actor in the health system. No, apparently not. It's really pleasant. But it's interesting to see that the software development companies are ranked relatively low. When one think that for the use of a standard, the software companies are key. I mean, if they, for whatever the reason, don't want to implement something, don't offer it, and they say to the customer, you can have a customized solution which costs you 10 times the price, the list price, that's not good for standard adoption. So, but of course, there must be a first and a last in this list. I wonder also why the pharmaceutical industry is in the 3rd position. I wonder, I mean, not that I'm unhappy, but the industry, that industry is mostly adopting rules which are set by national competent authorities or equivalent. I don't think they are sometimes proactive, but in this space, it's difficult because the amount of work and the certainty that your investment doesn't go lost requires some prudence, not to anticipate regulations which may not come.
There's an interesting comment in the Q&A that there's a difference whether I consider content or technological solutions. That's, of course, a very true remark. If you look at the MPD and CDSS providers as a second layer, they are, of course, working in support of the medical doctors and pharmacists. They provide both content and technology, by the way, for this. That's so, well, depends on how you look at things.
I'm searching the link to the gap analysis. Oh, you have found it? Oh, that's good. Excellent.
No.
There's one more question. Maybe it's time to go to that last one.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
What I will do is, because all the participants will receive an email from Zoom after this, and I will add in this email a link to the gap analysis, the core text, not the working documents, because these are difficult to handle. So that's the missing stakeholder. You had the ones we proposed, but now the other ones.
There's one additional question in the Q&A from Christine. For what reason do we need a SNOMED?
Is there anyone from SNOMED in the call? otherwise, I'll well, what we did see in the MHRA and SNOMED to MEDRA mapping. There are countries that have their clinical coding in SNOMED, and increasingly you see that clinical coding is being done in SNOMED across Europe. Many more people are investing in SNOMED licenses and in SNOMED implementation to capture key things like problems, intolerances, allergies, things that need to be communicated across borders. In the example I gave with MHRA is that you actually get the both the code for what type of adverse drug event was this, what were the reactions, what was the person treated with in terms of medication. And there's, especially in the UK with DM+D, is a SNOMED-based medicinal product dictionary. So they are using SNOMED, actually their national extension to SNOMED, to code their medications. So that's where SNOMED comes into play. And we see the same thing happen in other areas. There's, of course, especially around diagnosis problems, there's choices that you can have in terms of do I use a national list? Do I use SNOMED? Do I use classifications like either ICPC or ICD-10 or 11? ICD-11 was already mentioned. But there's a lot of coded content on what happened to a patient during an adverse drug event. That's where SNOMED comes in, but SNOMED also comes in, of course, in the reason for prescribing. So for what problem was this medication prescribed? That's also where it comes in, and it comes in the logic that clinical decision support systems provide in terms of where it goes. So that's my pitch for SNOMED in this medication and safe medication world. There are things like the allergies, intolerances, etc., that are to be coded one way or another, and SNOMED provides that option.
Well, I see the pharmacist should be, because that's heavy writing here on the screen, should be represented in the stakeholder for this institute, or whatever the structure will be. And I think this makes a lot of sense because they are the interface between the product and the consumer of that product, the patients. They are the advisor for the prescriber. They have a lot of roles here, of course. But I must also recognize that we don't have many pharmacists engaged in the standard development space. We don't have many pharmacists engaged in UNICOM. It's difficult to get health professional engaging in our work, which doesn't mean we are stopping. For instance, I know we have in this audience one pharmacist who is member of ISO 26215 Working Group 6. I noticed that. It's pleasant to see her engagement. And I suppose the end user and the patient is the same. Or do we consider end user as being, for instance, the prescriber or the dispenser? But I think the end user is the patient, I suppose. Huh?
Depends on which use case you're talking about, in which of the application areas or application domains. So it's different across the. But indeed, it is something to bear in mind. How does this impact the work? And one example, the one that I talked about the MHRA. There, the end users were the people that were actually receiving these reports and are now using that SNOMED to MEDRA mapping to actually have a much easier way of and much more consistent way of turning those reports, those yellow cards, into individual case safety reports using the MEDRA code. So those could be end users, the people that are actually receiving those reports. But also in pharmacovigilance, we're also looking at people that are searching for comparable cases across the world. Those are also end users of the IDMP standards, because their daily job is to make sure that if a new report comes in, to look at, well, is this something urgent? Have others seen this? And that's where it really comes in.
So we have less than 4 minutes left, 3 minutes. So I suggest that we pause with the Mentimeter and go back to the presentation. And I see there's 1 or 2 questions remaining in the chat or in the Q&A. There's somebody wondering how BOS and PAI are handled at clinical drug level while using PRD or MPRD to represent a medicine in EHR. Somebody who could answer that?
In the EHR, it's I don't think it has been defined very sharply yet. The PHPID, if it is the global one, might be helpful. But if you want to have information about the batch number of that medicinal product, then the PHPID doesn't work anymore. Then you have to switch at the other ends of the chain of identifiers and go to the data carrier identifier, which enables also to carry the batch number. If we look at this, that would be, for I would say case safety and adverse events, etc. This type of things, documenting there. If we think at another level of information, then the medicinal product identifier, I think, is the best appropriate, because the medicinal product then is not linked to a pack size, don't link to something so precise as would be the data carrier identifier, but helps to understand what it was, and it is jurisdiction by jurisdiction. So the MPID is something which is local, whereas the PHPID is global, but you are losing some elements of granularity with the PHPID, which you would gain by using the medicinal product identifier. And I think the data carrier identifier would be also a good way to go, perhaps in addition, in the health records, because of the existence of the batch number.
Thank you, Christian. And thanks so much to Anja, who answered the second question. Since we are in the last minute of this webinar, we will make it to an end. And last 2 slides. This one is on the invitation, in fact, for the closing meeting in April, 26th of April. There will be a closing UNICOM meeting online as well as face-to-face in Brussels. And if you are interested to join, you're very much welcome to do so. And you can register via the link on this slide.
And you will have the link in the confirmation email next week, Monday.
Thanks, Christian.
Okay.
And then we can go to the very last slide. Yeah, big thank you to all the participants for your quite active contributions. We are really happy that you were so anticipating and involved in our Mentimeter, and that's something we, yeah, absolutely can use very well in our last deliverable, the business plan, and will support, of course, the continuation of showing information on IDMP after the project. So thanks again. Please don't forget to fill out our evaluation form, and Christian will send a link to the gap analysis.
As well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone, and have a lovely rest of the day.
Bye-bye, and thank you.
Thank you. I think you're still recording and streaming to YouTube.
Ah, yes, we can stop that. Good plan.